You used to be more frugal, honey. But ever since you got with me, you've been spending like crazy. Trevor tossed the bank statement onto the counter like it was on fire. $2,300. In 1 month. He rubbed his temples. That headache was coming back, the one that showed up every time he looked at their finances these days. The list of charges went on forever. Some fancy candle store he'd never heard of, a place called Serenity Wellness, whatever the hell that meant. And 3 different clothing stores, all with those pretentious names that sounded like they belonged in France or something. What happened to the Haley who used to buy generic cereal, who'd drive an extra 10 minutes to save 50 cents on gas? Now she waltzed into stores like they were giving stuff away for free. His phone buzzed. Bank notification, $412 left in checking. Trevor's stomach did that thing where it feels like you're falling, even though you're standing still. Mortgage payment due Friday, and he'd already rated their savings last month to cover whatever this was. The front door slammed shut downstairs. Haley was home, and from the sound of all that rustling, she'd been shopping again. Trevor, you up there? Haley's voice drifted up from the hallway, all cheerful and songy. He didn't answer. Instead, he listened to her footsteps, heels clicking on the hardwood, then stopping, probably setting down more bags. Always more bags. Trevor folded the bank statement in half, then in half again, like that would somehow make the numbers smaller. 60-hour weeks at the construction site, his back screaming every night, hands so dry they looked like sandpaper, and for what? So his girlfriend could pretend they were living in some TV show where money grew on trees? Trevor? Her voice was closer now, coming up the stairs. He shoved the statement into his pocket. When she appeared in the doorway, all smiles and designer dress, another recent purchase he'd spotted on their account, something inside him just snapped. We need to talk, he said, and even he could hear how flat his voice sounded. Haley's smile flickered, just for a second, but he caught it, like she'd been expecting this conversation all along. About what? She asked, but her eyes were already scanning the room, probably looking for evidence of his snooping. Trevor pulled out the crumpled statement and smoothed it on the dresser. All of this, Haley, $2,300. She moved closer, and he caught a whiff of that perfume she wore now, the expensive stuff that came in a bottle the size of his thumb and cost more than he made in a day. But instead of getting defensive like he expected, she just stared at the paper with this weird expression. You're right, she said quietly. I have been spending more. Wait, what? Trevor had prepared for a fight. He'd been rehearsing this conversation for weeks, practicing his arguments while he drove to work. He'd expected tears, excuses, maybe her storming out and slamming doors. Then why? The question came out rougher than he meant it to. You used to clip coupons, for crying out loud. You used to check every receipt twice. Haley's fingers started doing that tapping thing on the dresser, that nervous habit she'd picked up recently. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I need to show you something, she said finally, and there was something in her voice that made Trevor's chest tighten. She disappeared into their walk-in closet, another thing they couldn't really afford about this place, and came back with a manila folder, the kind you'd use for important documents, tax stuff, legal papers. Trevor's confusion turned to dread as she set it on the dresser next to the bank statement. Her hands were shaking slightly as she opened it. I know about the loan, she said. The words hit Trevor like a punch to the gut. His secret, the $20,000 title loan against his pickup truck, the one he'd taken out 8 months ago when everything started falling apart, but 2L5Lee.erd? The one that was now 3 payments behind, felt suddenly exposed under the bedroom lights. What loan? He managed to say, but it sounded fake even to him. Haley pulled out a document. It was a photocopy of his loan agreement, complete with payment schedule and his signature. She'd known. Somehow, she'd known everything. The collection agency called me last Thursday. Haley continued, her voice steady despite the tears starting to form. They were looking for you, but apparently you put me down as a reference. Trevor felt like the floor was disappearing under his feet. All those months of blaming her, of making her feel guilty about every single purchase, of acting like she was the reason they were broke, when he'd been the one drowning them in debt the whole time. Haley, I can explain. You don't need to. she interrupted, pulling more papers from the folder. I've been working double shifts at the medical center for 4 months now, weekends, holidays, whenever they'd let me. She spread out receipts across the dresser, not for clothes or jewelry like he'd assumed, but for household stuff, groceries, medical supplies. And underneath those, bank deposit slips showing transfers to some savings account he'd never seen before. All those shopping bags you've been so mad about, I've been reselling everything online, the clothes, the accessories, even gift cards people gave me. I've saved almost $8,000, Trevor. I was going to surprise you next week, enough to get your truck payments caught up. Trevor stared at the evidence spread out in front of him, feeling like the world's biggest idiot. While he'd been stewing in resentment and blame, Haley had been quietly working incredibly hard to save them both. The guilt felt like a weight on his chest, making it hard to breathe. "Why didn't you just tell me you knew?" he whispered. Haley wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing her makeup. "Because you needed to feel like you were handling things, like you were taking care of us, I figured if I could just fix it quietly, you'd never have to feel like you'd screwed up." The irony was almost funny, if it wasn't so heartbreaking. They'd both been trying to protect each other and ended up nearly destroying their relationship instead. Trevor reached across the dresser, his work-roughened fingers finding hers. "I'm sorry," he said, and the words felt too small for how badly he'd messed up. "God, Haley, I'm so sorry." She squeezed his hand, her engagement ring, the simple one he'd bought 3 years ago when they were both broke, catching the light from the window. "We'll figure this out," she said. "Together. No more secrets, no more pointing fingers. Just us against the problem instead of us against each other." For the first time in months, Trevor felt like maybe they'd be okay.